Welcome to Oak Alley Plantation, August 1853, where the oaks stretch like silent sentinels over the misty swamp. The air thick with humidity, the scent of cane and something unsaid, something waiting. A black woman named Claudine moved among the rows, her eyes reflecting a sorrow and knowledge the masters could not see. Whispers spoke of her ability to hear the dead, to know secrets hidden in shadows. The wind seemed to obey her, trailing her veil like a shadow that had a life of its own. Before we begin, leave a comment where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening. Share what you feel, the chill, the unease, the whispers, because tonight, you are part of the story. That night, lightning forked across the cypress, illuminating figures that vanished when the eye tried to focus. The quarters grew quiet, too quiet. The overseer discovered ledgers missing, papers torn, and Claudine, nowhere to be found. Some call it a disappearance, others a restless spirit. Locals whisper that the swamp still remembers, that if you listen carefully tonight, you might hear her footsteps echoing through the Oak Avenue. August 1853, Louisiana, Oak Alley Plantation, a sprawling estate of gray columns and moss-laden oaks. The air sticky heavy with humidity and the lingering sweetness of cane. Morning light barely filtered through the thick canopy of trees, casting shadows across the wet ground. The swamp nearby exhaled mist curling around the cypress knees like pale fingers. Somewhere in the distance, the faint clang of a bell from the big house echoed, calling the enslaved workers to their labor. The quarters, small, wooden, and crowded, smelled of sweat smoke and cooked meals. Children huddled against the walls, their eyes wide ears, straining for the slightest sound. The men moved with practiced caution, machetes in hand, cutting through stalks of cane under the overseer's sharp gaze. His boots sank into the mud, leaving prints that were soon swallowed by the swamp's damp embrace. Every footstep, every whisper, every rustle in the cane became part of a rhythm of fear, toil, and survival. Claudine, young black Creole, known among the enslaved for her knowledge of herbs and old songs, her quiet strength, her ability to remember to observe. Some said she had eyes that saw beyond the physical, eyes that could pierce the veil between the living and the dead. She moved among the rows, inspecting the cane, speaking softly to those who dared listen, murmuring warnings that no overseer could understand. The air seemed to part for her, the wind bending slightly, carrying her voice across the marsh. The plantation house loomed above the quarters. White columns faded to gray with age, peeling paint revealing centuries of sun and storm. Inside, the mistress fussed over ledger books, counting valuables, unaware that secrets were moving in shadows just beyond the windows. Servants whispered of strange occurrences, footsteps in empty hallways, objects shifting inexplicably, doors closing on their own. Yet such tales never reached the ears of those in power. The hierarchy was rigid, the fear palpable, and Claudine, invisible to most yet omnipresent to those who watched the night. Beyond the cultivated fields, the swamp was a different world. A labyrinth of water mud and tangled roots. Cypress trees draped in Spanish moss formed twisted arches overhead. Herons lifted silently from the shallow pool's wings, brushing the mist. Frogs croaked in irregular rhythms, broken occasionally by the distant howl of a hound. Locals whispered that the swamp was alive, that it remembered, that the ghosts of those wronged lingered in its folds, moving unseen among the reeds and fallen branches. Claudine walked its edges, the veil of her dress trailing over the water's edge, sometimes dipping into shadows, sometimes reflected in the still pools. Her presence was both a warning and a comfort, a tether to the world she had been forced to navigate. In the big house, the master and overseer debated the harvest, the weight of taxes, debts, and the market pressing down upon them. The ledger marked progress in numbers, efficiency, and profit. human lives counted as ciphers on pages. Claudine and others were aware, always aware, of who gained, who lost, who disappeared. And at night, when the workers returned to the quarters, whispers began. Whispers of Claudine's vigilance, that she knew which souls had been taken too soon, which had been hidden away, which had been forgotten. The songs she sang carried these warnings, slipping past the cracks in the walls, curling through the mist, reaching ears tuned to the invisible. Even the weather seemed complicit. Storms rolled in with sudden intensity, clouds swallowing the sun. Rain hammered the roof in irregular patterns, lightning split the sky. Thunder shook the earth, vibrating through the mud and the columns alike. The swamp shimmered with water and shadow. In such moments, Claudine was said to walk faster, her steps deliberate, eyes scanning, the veil clinging to her like a second skin. Some claimed to see her in places she could not have reached, moving with a certainty that defied logic. The plantation was not isolated. Roads led to nearby towns, markets where goods were sold, news traded. Yet Oak Alley seemed a world apart, a microcosm where labor, fear, and supernatural rumor converged. Children were taught to stay indoors after dark. Adults whispered stories of past injustices, of spirits guarding what the living could not protect. These tales were part of the community's oral history, layered atop the written records of the overseer, the tax collector, and the newspaper clippings. A duality that would follow the plantation for generations. By mid-afternoon, the heat pressed down. Sweat-soaked shirts clung to backs. The sound of machetes slicing cane and the occasional shout of warning filled the air. The air itself seemed to pulse, carrying both human labor and something older, something patient, something watching. Claudine's figure sometimes caught in a shaft of light, moving like a shadow detached from her body. Observers described a presence that commanded attention, a balance between dread and reverence, between fear and hope. As evening approached, the swamp's mist thickened. Insects hummed in choruses that seemed to respond to the last rays of the sun. The cypress and oaks cast elongated silhouettes across the plantation grounds. In the quarters, candles flickered. The shadows danced across walls. And Claudine, sometimes glimpsed walking along the narrow paths between cabins. Sometimes seen by the water's edge, her reflection rippling in the swamp. She was both sentinel and specter, a reminder that history and memory were alive, that injustice lingered, and that someone, or something, still kept watch. The stage was set, the air charged with expectation. Each sound, each movement, each sigh and whisper contributed to a rhythm that was part human, part spectral, fact and folklore intertwined. Records and recollections, ledger books and songs, footsteps in mud and shadows in mist, all converged in this space, a plantation alive with the pulse of the seen and unseen. And as night fell, the boundaries blurred. Oak Alley was ready, the swamp was ready, and Claudine awaited. Fact: Claudine's presence on Oak Alley Plantation was more than anecdotal. Records indicate she was literate, a rarity among the enslaved. Her name appears in the overseer's ledger, a name inked carefully alongside the work quotas. Yet gaps emerge, pages torn smudged with mud and sweat, missing leaves, entries that abruptly stop mid-sentence. The day Claudine disappeared, the ledger ends with a dash, as if the pen itself had faltered. Folklore. The enslaved whispered of her powers, that she could hear the voices of the dead, that she walked between the world of the living and the shadowed realm beyond. Some said she spoke in the dialect of the ancestors' languages older than the sugarcane rows themselves, and that the spirits responded, bending the wind, moving the moss, guiding her steps. A melody would rise at dusk, a song of warning and remembrance. And those who heard it shivered knowing they were in the presence of something beyond understanding. Fact. Advertisements from nearby towns in 1853 listed runaway slaves. One described a woman small of stature with eyes deep and knowing, last seen near a plantation bordered by swamp and oak. The description matches Claudine. Yet no capture was recorded. The trail ends, vanished. Fate unknown. The newspapers of New Orleans hinted at disturbances on plantations, brief mentions of missing workers, mysterious lights over swamps. No explanations, just brief lines, lost in column margins, overlooked by those who sought only numbers, profits, labor accounted, not life. Folklore. Elders decades later recalled stories passed down of a woman moving silently along the banks of the swamp, of lantern light that flickered in rhythm with her heartbeat, of shadows that mirrored her own. They said she carried the weight of those who could not speak. The children called her the guardian of the lost. Parents warned their own not to betray secrets, lest Claudine's spirit take notice. Some swore that if you saw her veil in the mist, you would wake to hear names whispered, names of the dead, names of those who vanished, names forgotten by the ledgers. Fact. Claudine's work extended beyond the fields. She prepared remedies for fevers and injuries, herbs, roots, and poultices, recorded in the margins of the overseer's own notes, often dismissed as superstition. Yet some survived, in faded letters and journals in the memory of those who escaped. Her remedies healed not only the body, but the morale of the enslaved. A quiet defiance, an assertion of life where death and oppression were constant companions. Folklore. They say she could whisper to the swamp, that the cypress knees bent slightly when she passed forming paths invisible to others, that water would shimmer where she touched it, reflecting not just the face of the living, but the faces of those who had been taken, a spectral council of ancestors, guiding, observing, and warning. The overseer's presence could not penetrate these boundaries. Claudine walked with a confidence born of knowledge, ritual, and ancestral blessing. She was both human and something beyond human. Fact. Testimonies collected decades later by WPA workers recount plantation residents speaking of unusual occurrences. Objects moving on their own, doors closing, lanterns swinging despite calm air. Claudine's name emerges again. She watches. She protects. She walks between here and the beyond. Factually, these are anecdotes unverified by legal documentation. Yet the consistency across accounts suggests a persistent memory, a phenomenon rooted in both history and human perception. Folklore. The songs, oh the songs, sung at night often in whispers, carried across the quarters and the swamp. Claudine's melody, her rhythm, a code, a warning, a prayer. She would sing of those lost, of injustice unseen, of vengeance delayed but inevitable. Some claimed that those who heard it dreamed of her walking along the Oak Avenue, in dreams that bled into reality, waking to find traces of water on the floor, footprints in the mud, a veil draped over a branch, the intangible made real. Fact. The overseer's reports mention missing tools, livestock wandering into the swamp, strange lights over the fields. Timing coincides with Claudine's known movements. Whether coincidence or causation is unclear. Yet the pattern emerges, an envelope of disturbance. Records note frustration, but no understanding. The formal system could not account for spectral phenomena, for human ingenuity cloaked in the guise of magic. Folklore. A boy named Samuel decades later recounted how his grandmother described Claudine appearing in the swamp at night. She carried the names of the lost, and she would not let them be forgotten. If you saw her, you felt both fear and comfort. Fear for what she might do, comfort that she was watching over us. The swamp itself becomes a character, alive, sentient, responding to the rhythm of her steps, to the cadence of her voice. A living memory embedded in the landscape. Fact: letters from nearby town officials reference a woman seen wandering near the swamp, identity unknown, presumed runaway. No capture, no arrest. The trail cold. In the official ledger, fate unknown. Yet the fact of her existence documented, undeniable. Folklore. The stories transform her into a symbol, a sentinel, an intermediary, a guardian between life and the shadow, one who ensures that injustice does not go unnoticed. Her presence remembered even when her body was gone. Fact: some enslaved workers fled, escaping the plantation, citing fear and awe of Claudine. Accounts describe her walking silently, appearing and disappearing, a being part human, part otherworldly. Her influence rippled outward, shaping behaviors, instilling caution, perhaps preserving life through fear. Folklore. Mothers whispered her name to children as a protective charm, a warning, a talisman, that if you acted unjustly, she would see, she would remember. She would guide the spirits to witness. Fact: diaries from neighboring plantations mention mysterious sounds, shadows along the oak-lined avenues. Unnamed, unverified, yet consistently similar. Folklore. These accounts interweave with the local oral tradition, a tapestry of sound and shadow of memory and warning of Claudine as both guardian and ghost. She becomes a nexus, a focal point for the anxieties, hopes, and moral compass of a community under duress. Fact: historical maps show shifting settlements, cabins abandoned. Some speculate fear of the swamp, of Claudine's presence. Folklore. They say she marked the boundaries of justice, that no overseer dared cross the invisible line she set, and those who ignored the warnings were haunted. In dreams, in shadows, in the ripples of the swamp water. Fact and folklore converge, each reinforcing the other. The ledger incomplete but memory persistent. The swamp alive with both. Folklore. It is said that Claudine's spirit can still be felt in the rustle of Spanish moss, in the flicker of candlelight in the quarters, in the cold that settles without wind. Fact: visitors and historians report chills, anomalies, inexplicable disturbances, whether imagined or real. The legacy of Claudine persists, guiding, warning, protecting, through time, through space, through memory itself. Fact: WPA narratives, oral histories, and plantation records all corroborate parts of the story. Folklore. The songs, the whispers, the footprints in mud. Intangible yet persistent, forming a network of evidence that transcends conventional documentation. A duality that defines Oak Alley, that defines Claudine, that defines the swamp itself, the human and the spectral, the ledger and the song. Intertwined, inseparable. Fact and folklore, alternating, echoing, rising, falling. The rhythm of Oak Alley, of Claudine, of the unseen, the witness, the guardian, the ghost who refused to sleep. The night deepened, the air heavy with humidity, carrying the faint scent of cane-wet earth and something unsaid, a presence that made even the seasoned workers pause in their sleep. Claudine's absence was noticed first by a boy no older than 12. He stirred, hearing whispers that had no source. The wind shifted, carrying her name across the cane fields. His heart pounded, yet curiosity outweighed fear. He peered through the darkness toward the swamp, pale mist curling over the water, shadows stretching unnaturally, bending, twisting, as if the earth itself were breathing. Fact: The overseer's ledger from that week records unusual activity. Tools misplaced, livestock wandering near the swamp's edge. Gates rattling, though no hand touched them. Entries note disturbances without explanation. Workers complaining of unease. Yet the formal documentation stops, never acknowledging Claudine, as if erasing her presence could maintain the illusion of control. Folklore. The boy whispered to the others about Claudine's apparition. Translucent veil trailing behind her. Eyes faintly glowing. She moved with intention, watching, guiding. Some said she spoke in languages older than the plantation itself. Melodic syllables carrying warnings. The names of those lost, those silenced. The children huddled together, understanding the weight of what they could not see. Meanwhile, in the big house, the mistress noticed inexplicable events. Silverware displaced, faint sounds of steps in empty halls, the swish of fabric when no one should be present. Fact. Diaries from servants note these occurrences, unverified officially. Folklore. They claimed Claudine moved through walls, unbound by boards or nails. Her sense of justice and protection transcending the physical. She was everywhere, and nowhere, at once. In the northern fields, men labored under August sun, machetes slicing cane. One stopped abruptly, sensing movement behind him, shadows flickering across the periphery. He looked toward the swamp, and there she stood, Claudine, watching silently, purposeful. Fact. The overseer recorded multiple complaints of visions and unexplained sounds. Folklore. Workers whispered of her spectral figure patrolling the boundaries, ensuring justice, protecting those who could not defend themselves. Her presence demanded reverence and fear. A third incident. A young girl vanished from her cabin. Fact. No ledger entry, only an empty bed. Folklore. Children later described hearing her voice alongside Claudine's song. Shimmering light over the swamp. Paths appearing where none existed. The girl returned after several days, claiming guidance by Claudine. Safe, though she could not explain how. The spectral and human worlds intertwined. Inseparable. Even the animals reflected the disturbances. Mules refused certain paths. Dogs growled at nothing. Cattle gathered near quarters restless. Fact. Some behaviors noted in plantation records. Folklore. Locals spoke of the swamp responding to Claudine. The land remembering, protecting, warning. Boundaries invisible to overseers. The very soil imbued with her presence. Across the fields, another disappearance. A young man vanished near the cane stacks. Fact. The ledger marked absent without explanation. Folklore. Whispers claimed Claudine had intervened, that she appeared to him guiding him safely through the swamp, ensuring he escaped punishment. Yet those who opposed the enslaved saw only chaos, a spirit they could not command. The duality of fear and reverence expanded. A minor fire broke out in the cane fields. Fact. Investigation reports inconclusive. No determined cause. Folklore. The fire was said to mark boundaries, a warning to those who would overstep. Claudine's presence sensed even in the flickering flames. Her justice intangible, yet undeniable. The lesson carried forward in whispers, in song and shadowed memories. In the quarters nightly, children spoke in hushed voices, recounting shadows by the swamp, fleeting glimpses of a figure, a veil flowing, eyes glowing. Folklore. Claudine's melody became a protective charm, a warning, a guide. Fact. WPA narratives and later oral histories confirm repeated accounts of lights and sounds that could not be explained. Consistency across decades suggests a persistent memory, a presence. Another incident. A pair of workers reported hearing footsteps along the Oak Avenue. Heavy, deliberate, yet never intersecting with their own. Fact, no official record. Folklore. The footsteps belonged to Claudine, marking the boundary between oversight and protection. A silent sentinel ensuring no injustice went unpunished. Even the swamp itself seemed alive. Frogs croaked in irregular rhythms. Herons lifted silently. Wind whispered through moss-laden cypress. Fact. Meteorological records note unusual weather patterns that week. Sudden storms, fog shifts in wind. Folklore. Locals attributed these to Claudine, the environment bending subtly to her presence. The land and spirit intertwined. By the end of the month, the pattern solidified. Disappearance, strange sounds, glimpses of the veil, protective interventions. Fact and folklore entwined. Ledger books incomplete, yet memory persistent. The swamp a living record, the quarters alive with both human and spectral testimony, each incident layering upon the last, escalating tension, preparing the plantation, the community, for the events yet to unfold. Oak Alley had become a stage. The swamp a theater of shadows. Fact, tangible evidence sparse, yet undeniable. Folklore, whispers, songs, visions, a network of memory that defied ledger entries, the rhythm of life and death, work and vigilance. And at the center, Claudine, human spectral guardian, observer, protector, the ghost who refused to sleep. The incidents accumulated, rising, like waves upon the swamp, creating a pulse, a cadence, an expectation that something unseen was always watching. Fact, events documented. Folklore, events remembered, converging in a rhythm of the living and the dead, shaping a narrative that would echo for generations. Night descended, mist thickened, shadows lengthened across the cane and swamp. The rhythm persisted. The footsteps, whispers, songs, a living record, a spectral archive. The rising tension palpable, and Claudine remained, watching, guiding, remembering, shaping the fate of Oak Alley. Fact. Decades after Claudine's disappearance, archival reports continued to surface. Letters from New Orleans officials mentioned a woman seen wandering near Oak Alley. Identity unconfirmed, presumed runaway, fate unknown. Maps from the era illustrate abandoned cabins along the swamp's edge, subtle shifts in settlement patterns. Fact. Newspapers from 1853 to 1855 briefly noted mysterious lights over plantations, reports of livestock moving without cause, doors found open when wind was absent. Each fragmentary record contributes to the tapestry of memory, a ledger incomplete, a trail broken, yet undeniable in its persistence. Folklore. Elders remembered Claudine's presence as if etched into the landscape itself. Her veil flowing in the mist, her eyes glowing faintly. They said she moved not as a human, but as a guardian, a sentinel of justice and remembrance. Songs carried across the quarters, melodies that whispered the names of those lost. Each note a tether, linking the living to the departed. The swamp itself became a stage, the cypress knees bending to accommodate her passing. Water reflecting shapes that did not exist, yet could not be ignored. Fact. Reports of the plantation's anomalies coincided with broader regional events. Exodus of freedmen, rumors of supernatural interventions during labor disputes. Military correspondence from nearby posts referenced disturbances among enlisted black soldiers. The Phantom Regiment, they called it, unseen yet felt. Movements reported in the night, echoes of footsteps on empty grounds. Fact. Military and civilian accounts often diverged. Some dismissed the claims as hysteria. Others meticulously recorded them. Folklore. Locals recounted how Claudine would appear to those who toiled unjustly, standing at the edge of the swamp, guiding a lost child back to safety, warning a worker of the overseer's impending wrath. Her voice both a lullaby and a threat. Parents would hush their children at dusk, cautioning them to respect the boundaries she marked, to honor the spirits of those who had been taken. Claudine's presence intertwined with the rhythm of the land, the cadence of injustice and survival. Fact. Exodus or migration records highlight small groups departing from plantations like Oak Alley, seeking freedom or merely escape. Letters between relatives describe strange occurrences, lanterns floating across the fields, shadows where none should be. Fact. No official confirmation connects these events to Claudine, yet the temporal alignment is compelling. The anecdotal evidence resonates with patterns observed in the ledger and diaries. Folklore. Dream narratives abound. Individuals claim to dream of Claudine walking beside them, guiding them through the swamp, pointing towards safe paths. Yet some dreamed warnings of those who dared cross moral boundaries. The dreams left impressions, waking visions that mirrored the spectral activity reported in the quarters. Children and adults alike remembered her in different forms, as a protector, as a wraith, as justice manifested. Fact. Diaries from the overseer's descendants revealed mentions of strange activity, missing items, livestock behaving oddly, unexplained lights, entries often vague, marked with ellipses, dashes, half-formed sentences, leaving gaps for interpretation. Historians later cross-referenced these entries with oral histories, finding consistent patterns. Fact. Although not conclusive, the overlap suggests a persistent phenomenon. Folklore. Claudine's influence extended to the swamp itself. Locals believe the waters and trees remembered her steps, that mist would rise unnaturally, reflecting her presence. Animals reacted. Mules refused paths. Cattle restless. Dogs growled at empty spaces. The land and the spectral merged, the living world bending subtly to her will. Boundaries invisible to overseers, visible only to those attuned to the rhythm of injustice and protection. Fact. Letters and newspaper clippings from the 1920s recount sightings of light shadows and figures near the swamp. Some attributed these to residual hallucinations or folklore. Yet, multiple independent sources corroborate occurrences. Fact. The recurrence over decades indicates more than coincidence. Patterns repeat. Echoes persist. Folklore. Elders' narratives describe Claudine appearing during critical moments, halting a violent overseer, guiding a worker to safety, her veil flowing in the swamp mist, a spectral presence corporeal only to those she chose to reveal herself. The songs she sang carried coded instructions, names, locations, warnings, the melodies woven into the night air. Fact and folklore merging, creating a layered archive, tangible and intangible, recorded and remembered. Fact. Plantation maps from the Reconstruction era illustrate boundaries. Swamplands, cabins, oak avenues, folklore. The lines drawn by Claudine's footsteps became symbolic. Areas considered safe, areas considered taboo. Those who ignored the warnings reported anomalies. Fact. Gaps remain. Documentation incomplete. Folklore. Oral history preserved what written records could not. Memory became a vessel for persistence. The swamp itself a witness. Another rising incident. A sudden fire in the cane fields. Fact. Official inquiry inconclusive. No cause determined. Yet several workers reported seeing Claudine along the perimeter, standing silently, observing. Her presence felt though unseen by others. Folklore. She marked limits, a warning to those who would overstep. Her influence tangible in subtle ways, a moral compass manifested through the supernatural. Fact. WPA narratives collected in the 1930s reiterate multiple accounts of unexplained lights, sounds, and movements at Oak Alley. Diaries, letters, and interviews consistently reference Claudine's presence. Details align across decades. Folklore, the melody, the veil, the glow in her eyes. Repeated motifs, a pattern of guardianship, justice, and memory, interlaced with historical fact. Fact. The plantation's ledger, the letters, the diaries. Incomplete but persistent. Folklore, the stories, songs, footsteps, reflections in the swamp. The duality maintained, forming a rhythm, a pulse, a cadence. Oak Alley alive with the intersection of human and spectral activity. Fact and folklore indistinguishable in impact. Claudine became more than a woman, more than a record, more than a memory. She became a guardian of those lost, a sentinel of justice, a bridge between the living and the spectral. Her presence echoed in the mist, the oaks, the quarters, the swamp. Each rising incident reinforced the narrative. Each song, each whisper, each unexplained light. A testimony that fact alone could not capture. Fact. Visitors decades later reported Chill's footsteps and glimpses of a figure near the Oak Avenue. Folklore. Locals confirmed the accounts, that Claudine walked still, observing, guiding, her legacy imprinted in the land, in memory, in story. The interplay of fact and folklore reached its peak, establishing the foundation for the events to come. The night thickened. Shadows lengthened. The swamp whispered. Footsteps echoed. The rhythm of Oak Alley continued. Fact. Recorded fragmented. Folklore. Persistent alive. Together weaving a complex narrative. The rising tension set. The stage prepared. And Claudine remained. Watching. Protecting. Guiding. Shaping the fate of Oak Alley. Through centuries, through memory, through the veil. The ledger ends. Abruptly. A dash trailing off the page. Ink smudged by rain, by sweat, by the passage of hands that trembled under the weight of labor and fear. Fact. Decades later, researchers would uncover fragments of Claudine's story. Letters from New Orleans diaries tucked away in trunks, marginal notes scribbled in haste. Maps of Oak Alley showing the Oak Avenue, the swamp's edge, the abandoned quarters. Gaps remain. Names unrecorded, fates unknown. The trail is fragmented, incomplete, yet persistent. Folklore. The spirit of Claudine moves beyond documentation. Her presence felt in every corner of the plantation, along the edges of the swamp, beneath the cypress knees. Locals spoke of lanterns floating across the water, reflections shifting, whispers carried on humid breezes, a melody rising at dusk, notes bending through the mist, calling to the lost, warning the living. Each sound a thread linking centuries, each shadow a marker of justice yet delivered. Fact. Archival materials indicate that military detachments stationed nearby noted unusual activity in the late 1850s and during the Civil War. Soldiers reported lights along the swamp, figures glimpsed at night, footsteps in empty fields. Fact. These reports were sporadic, dismissed by superiors as exaggeration, yet cross-referenced with oral histories. A pattern emerges. The presence of someone or something unaccounted for in the records. Folklore. Elders recalled Claudine appearing at pivotal moments, guiding the vulnerable, warning those who trespassed. Appearing at dawn or dusk, sometimes in full form, sometimes as a shimmer, a veil. a reflection in water that wasn't there. Children remembered dreams where she walked beside them, singing names, marking boundaries. A spectral sentinel whose authority transcended life and death. Fact: Reconstruction-era documents reveal abandoned cabins, names of former slaves who disappeared. Letters hint at unrest, disturbances along Oak Alley. Fact: The plantation's records are incomplete, diaries destroyed, official correspondence missing. Folklore: The ghostly Claudine bridges these gaps. Her song carries the lost stories. Her presence fills the void left by absent records. She becomes the keeper of memory, a living archive. The swamp responds, its breath heavy, mist rising, branches bending, cypress knees forming subtle patterns, animals restless, mules refusing paths, dogs growling at empty air, cattle gathering near the quarters. Fact: These observations appear in multiple accounts. Folklore: The land itself bends to Claudine's will, a guardian's rhythm, echoing the moral compass she embodied. The swamp alive with both human and spectral narrative. A ledger discovered in the 1930s, a list of names, those lost, fate unknown. The entries sparse, half-formed, incomplete. Fact: Historians cross-reference these names with WPA narratives, oral histories, anecdotal reports of lights, shadows, and songs. A consistent pattern emerges. These names once erased now resonate, restored in memory. Folklore: Claudine's presence amplifies, her spectral figure appearing at moments of crisis, guiding a child, warning a worker, halting an overseer, the veil flowing, eyes glowing faintly, melody rising, the swamp and plantation responding, a rhythm of justice and protection. The unseen made tangible, the spectral intertwined with the living. Fact: Letters from descendants of enslaved workers reference repeated observations, some dismissed as imagination, yet consistent in detail. Fact: Journal entries describe disturbances in the quarters, movements in the swamp shadows at dusk. The repetition of events across decades suggests a persistent phenomenon. Folklore: The story grows, evolving with each retelling, yet anchored in the land, in the swamp, in the oaks. Night descends, the swamp thick with fog. Shadows stretch, lanterns flicker, the rhythm of footsteps, a melody through the mist. Fact: Observers from the 19th and 20th centuries report chills, echoes, sensations impossible to account for. Folklore: Claudine walks, sings, watches, the guardian of Oak Alley, protector of memory, enforcer of justice. A minor fire breaks out in the fields. Flames lick the cane. Fact: Investigation inconclusive. No cause determined. Workers report a figure standing at the perimeter. Folklore: The fire marks boundaries, warnings encoded in flame. Claudine's presence sensed, her authority over land and life, her justice subtle yet undeniable. The rising incidents converge. Voices, shadows, ledger entries, maps, letters, oral histories. Fact and folklore entangled. Each mini-case reinforcing the other. The pulse of Oak Alley quickens, the rhythm of unseen feet, the whisper of the veil, the shimmer of lanterns across the swamp, the melody of names, alive, insistent. The climax unfolds. Researchers, historians, and descendants converge on the plantation. Fact: Gaps in documentation, fragments of diaries, missing letters, folklore, whispers of the veil, sightings of a woman moving silently across the grounds, the swamp responding, branches swaying, mist curling, the rhythm unbroken. Claudine's presence, central, undeniable, guiding, warning. remembering. Fact, incomplete, yet traceable. Folklore, pervasive, persistent, shaping memory, behavior, and story. Each observer, living or spectral, adding a layer, creating a tapestry of justice and remembrance. The human and spectral worlds merge. The ledger ends, but the rhythm continues. The footsteps, the melody, the whispers, the swamp alive with her presence. Fact and folklore intertwined. A climax not in a single event, but in the accumulation of centuries. The echo of injustices. The guardianship of a spectral sentinel. The memory of Oak Alley held in mist and song and shadow. And as the night deepens further, the observer senses it. The presence, not corporeal, not fully absent. Fact. The archives, the letters, the maps, folklore, the melodies, the veil, the whispers, together forming a bridge, a deep connection between what was and what endures, between the living and those lost, between justice and memory. Claudine, the ghost who refused to sleep, walks still, unseen, yet ever present, ensuring the stories are carried, that the names are remembered, that the swamp, the Oak Avenue, the quarters, resonate with life and memory. Fact, partial fragmented. Folklore, alive, persistent. The climax, not an ending, but the peak of resonance. The moment where all threads human spectral history legend converge, the heartbeat of Oak Alley palpable, the pulse of Claudine undeniable. The night exhales, the swamp breathes, the oaks sway, the veil drifts, the song lingers, fact and folklore echoing, carrying the story forward, the spectral archive complete, yet open, alive, waiting for the next observer to witness. Today, Oak Alley Plantation stands restored, columns gleaming under the Louisiana sun, the Oak Avenue stretching long and silent. Yet the swamp breathes still, mist curling along its edges, shadows lingering where the past refuses to rest. Fact, visitors report chills, glimpses of a figure at the water's edge, lanterns floating briefly across the cane, doors closing on their own, objects moving without explanation, diaries and ledgers intact, yet incomplete. Fragments of a story that continues. Folklore, locals, historians, descendants, all speak of Claudine, the woman who refused to sleep, guardian of memory, sentinel of justice. The melody of her song carried forward in spirituals, in whispers, in dreams. Children hear her footsteps in the mist. Adults feel her presence in the quiet of the Oak Avenue. The swamp itself remembers. The land itself testifies. And those who listen carefully can hear the rhythm of her watch, the pulse of a spirit who refuses to be forgotten. Fact, scholars note that many of the records from Oak Alley and surrounding plantations remain incomplete. Letters, lost, diaries, destroyed, official reports missing. Yet oral histories, WPA narratives, and folklore preserve what documentation could not. Names once erased are remembered. Stories once silenced are sung. Fact and folklore converge, creating a tapestry of memory that spans centuries. The lines between record and legend blurred. The human and spectral worlds continue their dialogue. The oak trees sway. Spanish moss drifts in the breeze. The swamp exhales its mist. Footsteps, a veil floating, a song rising in the distance. Fact. Researchers have measured temperatures, humidity, light anomalies, unexplained phenomena. Folklore. Witnesses speak of sensations, chills, feelings of being observed, fleeting shadows, the essence of Claudine. Present, watching, guiding, reminding. Even the descendants of those who once labored here carry echoes. Stories passed down through generations. Spirituals sung with knowledge of the lost. Oral histories preserving lessons of survival, resistance, and remembrance. Fact. Census records, migration maps, letters confirm the lineage of families. Folklore. They recount Claudine's guidance, her interventions, her protective presence in moments of danger, in dreams, in songs, in the swaying moss. Visitors walking the Oak Avenue feel it. A subtle pause in the air, a momentary shift, a chill that cannot be explained. Fact. Some attempt to record these sensations. Cameras, thermometers, journals. Patterns emerge. Anomalies repeat. Folklore. Locals smile knowingly, recognizing the presence, acknowledging that Claudine continues her watch. That the swamp, the land, and the plantation itself are conduits of memory. The legacy of Oak Alley and Claudine endures. Fact. Names recorded, events documented, physical structures preserved. Folklore. Melodies linger, shadows move, the veil drifts across misted swamp. The rhythm of justice, protection, and remembrance persists. A bridge connecting the past and present, the living and the dead.